Okay. This is the Hospital Institutions Orientation training video for Northern New Mexico area. I want to start with a little bit of H&I history. And the question was, when was the first Narcotics Anonymous H&I subcommittee meeting? This happened to occur in Southern California in 1963. So this has been around a long time. And H&I has been around in our region for quite a while and in our area. And there's a lot of material for H&I. You don't need to remember all of this stuff. The point of this slide is simply to say there's been a lot of work on the H&I guidelines and H&I history, both over the last many years and over the last few years, with COVID, changes in legality that's been required for H&I as we go into treatment centers, jails, and prisons. But one of the things to emphasize is that an H&I panel meeting is different than a regular NA meeting. And we'll go through these. So what are the differences? Well, first of all, they're not self-supporting. They use the area fund, so they don't follow the seventh tradition. Additionally, anonymity is not protected. In the treatment centers, you often have to sign in with your full name. And in jails and prisons, you have to get cleared, and they know a lot about you. So your anonymity is not protected. And of course, inmates and clients can't get out to regular meetings. So you can't just say, well, go to a different meeting. And meetings often are under surveillance. Another point is that H&I panel members must follow the rules of the facility, such as restricted access, no cell phones, any dress codes that are required, as well as sexual harassment requirements. I'll get into that a little more later. Another point is that H&I panels are not autonomous. Groups are autonomous, but panels are not. Panels have to follow the area guidelines, and they take direction from the Northern New Mexico area H&I subcommittee. So what does H&I do? We carry the message of recovery, those who can't attend to meetings. This includes taking a panel member into a treatment center or institutions. We do our best to provide meeting guides for when they get out. Occasionally that is working with reentry managers. We send books and literature to institutions. And there's writing letters, guiding people to do steps behind the walls. I'll go into that a little bit more later as well. Most of all, H&I provides hope for those that have been given the gift of desperation and they're setting in a treatment center, jail, or prison. So what are the types of treatment facilities and how does H&I work within these facilities? So there's the short term. These are detox centers, 3 to 6 days. The 28-day facilities, the spin dry systems. And there's outpatient facilities. These aren't eligible for H&I because those folks can, in fact, get out to regular meetings. There is long-term treatment facilities. These are recovery houses that may or may not be eligible, depending on what restrictions they have on the house, whether they can get out or not. There are halfway houses, occasionally known as sober living environments. These aren't eligible for H&I, so that they can. And there's also psychiatric hospitals. We get some of those over in Las Vegas. And they actually are interested in us having an H&I panel come in there. Or at the moment, we don't have enough volunteers. types of institutional facilities, there's the long-term prisons, and we do a lot of prison work in northern New Mexico area. We work with Springer, the women's prison, and also Grants, the women's prison. We're partnered there with the Albuquerque, greater Albuquerque area. And we also go into Clayton and, of course, the prison in New Mexico in Santa Fe. There are short-term facilities. These are jails. That's the Santa Fe County Jail, the Taos County Jail, and the San Miguel County Jail. We go into all of those. And there are adolescent facilities. We used to go into juvie. We don't anymore. That's been moved to down to Albuquerque. So what are the connections between H&I and PR? And they're strong. The PR connection, we have to build and maintain relations. Anytime that you go into a facility, even if you're going in on Zoom, you interact with the staff people there. And so you are doing a certain amount of PR work. So you want to be careful that you represent Narcotics Anonymous. And anytime that we get a meeting started, new, or we make significant changes, it's often the case for H&I to do cooperation with PR. We did joint presentations, for example, at the Santa Fe County Jail in order to get in there and do things around during COVID. And we came in on Zoom. We've done a fair amount of that work throughout the region and the area. Our area has been on the forefront of helping the region establish H&I across prisons in New Mexico. And, we work with the PR committees to do that information. Once in a while, there actually isn't a PR committee in our area. That's happened a few times. So I want to mention that while H&I has been consistent all the way through, PR is not. Occasionally, we need to take on a PR role because there's no PR person available, in which case there is information in the PR handbook that says how to work with correctional facilities or how to work with treatment facilities. There's a complete chapter on each of these items in the PR book, and it's occasionally useful, particularly if you're a panel leader or want to be a panel leader, that you take a moment and scan through that, as well as the H&I book in general. H&I functions at multiple levels, and I want to explain how this service structure all works. There is the Area Service Committee. This reports directly to the groups. It is not autonomous. The groups are the ones that are autonomous, and they provide oversight to the Area Service Committee. The Area Service Committee provides literature and funding to the H&I Subcommittee. Of course, the H&I Subcommittee reports to the Area Service Committee. It's directly responsible. It makes written reports to them. And there are guidelines in the area level that affect H&I. And there are guidelines in our subcommittee, and that also affects H&I, of course. And there's the H&I panel members. So the H&I panel members are directly responsible to the subcommittee to run panel meetings, maintain relationships with the facility, and provide written correspondence. The panel leaders are supposed to write a report so that the subcommittee stays informed. The panel leaders may set the meeting format, but that's about all that they can do. They have to report anything else up there. Members that go into the panel are qualified by the subcommittee, and this is part of that qualification. We go through orientation, and the new members should show up and talk to the H&I subcommittee. Speakers, such as at the treatment centers, are qualified by the panel leader. That's part of the panel leader's job, and I'll go into that more later. Sexual harassment. So this has been a big deal the last few years, and it's rather serious. To give you a sense of this, in one of the prisons, some of the guards have been thrown in jail over sexual harassment. They're taking it very seriously. And here in our H&I, let me mention that the Santa Fe Recovery Center in 2019 had some people coming in doing 12-step work, and 2 of them have been banned for life from the facility. And I'll go into exactly what happened there. I might mention that neither of these people came in representing NA, although they certainly had attended NA meetings. They came in representing a different fellowship and did something that was considered sexual harassment. And the staff took a picture of them, and they are banned for life. So we don't want to have anything like that occur. So there's a zero tolerance. You don't get, oh gosh, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. No, they don't allow that. Once is enough and you're gone. So you don't say anything about their body, good or bad. No relationships, even consensual ones. I might add, if you've got a current relationship with a client or an inmate, you need to recuse yourself and say, I'm not really going to, I have to step out and not be a part of this one. Harassment is in the eyes of the victim. What used to be considered acceptable isn't anymore. And you don't get to say, well, I didn't think I did anything wrong. And I'll give you an example. This is actually the case that somebody did. In the recovery center, somebody was sharing about being raped and abused. And after the meeting, while they were talking, one of the panel members, again of a different fellowship, came up to them and said, well, what was your part in all that? Which is old recovery talk that you want to know what your talk is. But in this particular, in an H&I setting, that was considered harassment, and the staff banned them for life. In jails, in prisons, most jails, and the treatment centers, you're going to have to take sexual harassment training. And in the treatment center here, it doesn't amount to anything more than reading a pamphlet. It depends on the treatment center. Shadow Mountain is looking at doing possibly more. And most of them do keep staff members in the meeting to see how things are going. The jails and prisons both require you to do an orientation that includes sexual harassment training. PREA, if you go into the prisons and some of the jails, including San Miguel, you have to go through PREA training. This is the Prison Rape Elimination Act. It's a federal law. And all the people entering the facility are mandatory reporters. You happen to go in, you're a contractor, you're working on the roof, you must go through PREA training. It turns out that inmates are much more likely to report things to volunteers than they are to the staff. So they took note of that, and they require everybody to report. So this is the federal law, and you agree to it in part of the stuff that you sign. So the practical application of this is you may be handed a note or somebody may take you aside and talk to you. If that note says the inmate's being abused, you need to report it. And the facility will tell you what the reporting procedures are. It generally amounts to not reporting it to the person that's immediately there. If you're being escorted, it's more you would take it to Command Central and report it to the captain of the guard. If it's anything besides sexual harassment, you have to hand it back. We can't carry messages back and forth, but we have to make that one exception. It's the law. And I might add, there's no such thing as consensual sex. If you have a client or an inmate who would like to have sex with you, this happens more often than you might think. Had a case up in Springer where somebody walked in and so they found their ex, who was now clean, and wanted to sneak off a little bit over into a corner. Can't do that. As a matter of fact, it is a 4th-degree felony if you have sex, including consensual sex, with an inmate in this state. So you can get charged with a crime, even if everybody is agreeing. The reason for that is that there's a power imbalance with inmates, and so consent is not considered valid. Steps behind the walls. This is kind of a new program we had going for a couple of years, and it writes letters to inmates to guide them through the steps. It's not completely sponsorship, although it's pretty close, and some places actually do call it that. But the person doing the step guide, as it's called, doesn't actually share personally identifiable information. So it's not quite the same thing. And we do a lot of stuff to protect NA and NA members with regard to confidentiality. And here's how we do it. The H&I panel, that may be you, provides the facility with a flyer. And most of this goes into prisons because of the length of time it takes to set everything up and work steps. We usually don't do it at the jail unless they're in there for a long term, and we usually don't do it at treatment centers because they're doing their own work. But we do it at prisons quite a bit, and we have 3 prisons that our area works with, and it may become more since our area is home to the PO box that the entire state uses. So the panel gets a flyer that has a PO box to the inmate. The inmate sends a request, hey, I'd like to do this. The coordinator sends out the agreement that's fairly elaborate. You can't use this for parole. You can't, and you've got to supply your own pen and paper and things of that nature. The inmate looks through this, signs and says, okay, I still want to do it. Once the coordinator has that, then they assign a step guide to that inmate, and the step guide starts mailing the inmate with material to work steps on. And the inmate doesn't get the step guide's address or correct name. The step guide will make an alias up and send that in. And the inmate mails to the PO box. The coordinator sends that response to the step guide, and they continue to do step work. And it works pretty well. This is happening all over the world. Was just working with some people over in Russia. They have quite an elaborate steps behind the walls system going. And COVID really pushed this into the forefront. So I'm going to go through the basics, the do's and don'ts. If you're a panel leader and you can bring in outside speakers, you need to screen the speakers, clarify those rules that, The facility may have specific rules. Example, if you're going physically into grants, there is certain clothing you can and cannot wear. And you need to clarify any sexual harassment policy, particularly at the Santa Fe Recovery Center. The panel members are screened by the subcommittee, of course. You want to start and end on time. This is respectful because the place that you're have, if you're going in physically, or the time of the people if you're going in on Zoom, is scheduled, and they need to be somewhere. And they don't want to wait on you. This is part of our PR relations. Some treatment facilities have clean time requirements, and of course, some, and there's the H&I subcommittee guidelines. You need to give those guidelines clear consideration. You want to ensure that anybody you have speaking has a clear NA message of recovery and is carried by all the panel members. Meeting guides, literature, all this type of, and you need to have this stuff available. And so in order to do that, you want to put your orders in for more of it into the subcommittee. This is part of the communication between the panel and the subcommittee. There may be special agreements in writing. There may be special agreements, you need to get it in writing. An example was at one point we were able to bring coffee into the prison. That's very special. You want to get it in writing and bring it to the subcommittee for review. There's two reasons for that. One is to get clarity on what the agreement is, because once it's in black and white, as opposed to a verbal agreement, it has more clarity. And two, the person you made the agreement with at the facility may change, and the new person is going to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. So if you want to keep this in place, you want to have something in writing from the previous person, so you have a strong negotiating point to come in and reestablish whatever that agreement was. During the meeting, you want to explain, what H&I is. You're in there for introduction. And clearly state that NA is separate from the treatment facility and the other fellowships. Emphasize that NA recovery is available to all addicts, regardless of the drug used. The reason we're named Narcotics Anonymous is because the term narcotics in 1953 meant everything. It encompassed, speed, downers, and all the whole range of any illicit substances. And the drug team and the police was known as the Narco Squad. So that's how we got our name, but it does cover all drugs. And you may want to explain the language we use, addict, clean time, and so forth, and why we use it. Things not to do. Unfortunately, the don'ts outnumber the do's to some extent. The panel leader, of course, and everybody shouldn't bring any contraband items like cell phones. That bringing a cell phone into a jail or prison in the state of New Mexico is a Class 4 felony. You can suddenly wind up on the wrong side of an H&I panel. And of course, no weapons either, and that extends to pocket knives. And any other dress guide that they have. I remember going in with one person and they had sleeveless shirts on. Sleeveless shirts are banned. And so they couldn't do the panel. And you don't want to do anything that's considered sexual harassment, including jokes. And I know we all have this broken sense of humor, and it is funny. And sometimes it's a useful thing to connect to newcomers, but we can't do it as part of an H&I panel. Can't take messages or carry letters in and out of the facility. Can't say, oh gosh, let my mom know I'm okay, or my brother know I'm okay. We can't do that. You can't show favoritism to a resident. You treat everybody the same. We should do that in a normal case, but it's especially important for H&I panels. Don't bring an NA member in to be a speaker who has friends or family in the treatment center of the institution. Now, how close is that since this is a small area? If it's somebody who has an ongoing relationship with that person of a sexual nature, or if it's somebody who has a parent, child, or sibling. You start to get out to uncles, aunts, cousins, it's okay. That's the current working model. You don't want to attend H&I facilities alone if possible. Once in a great while, you may wind up with the person you were going in with not able to make it at the last minute. And you might go in by yourself or you might not. You get to choose. But if it happens very much, then this has to be brought to the subcommittee, and we'll look at either getting someone else assigned or possibly canceling that meeting. If you're going to do an H&I presentation, say with PR, you definitely don't want to do that by yourself. Panel member dues. This is the member, not the leader. You want to involve the residents in the meeting, especially those that are in long-term treatment facilities. Use the readings for this. Emphasize the importance of getting to an NA meeting the first day out, not the next day, the first day. You want to tell them, hey, look, you're going to get a meeting guide as you walk out. All the facilities that we go into have a reentry manager. You should be giving them an NA meeting schedule. And you want to tell them, hey, look, the moment you get 10 feet out the door, you got your cell phone back, make a call to the hotline and arrange for what the meeting is going to be your first day. Don't go home without a plan. So you also want to emphasize the importance of a sponsor, regular NA meeting attendance, group commitments after the release, the standard stuff. Explain the language we use again, and obey that dress code. Exercise some common sense. You don't want to be real flashy. And they may have some security regulations that seem pretty stupid. For example, if you go into P&M, you're going to have to sign in twice. Okay, you do it. This is part of what you signed up for. Panel member don'ts. First slide. Don't debate any issue involving the treatment facilities, rules, regulations, the other fellowships, and don't talk about other residents or the staff. Again, no sexual harassment, not even jokes. Don't get sidetracked in the conditions within the facility. Inmates and clients love to bitch. Don't get caught up in that. So don't discuss any of the treatment with how the rules are, how other residents are, how staff members are, anything like that. Don't sponsor residents of the treatment facility that you're attending. Why is that? You can sponsor a resident of a different treatment facility, just not the one that you're an H&I panel member in, because that would involve a certain amount of favoritism. And we don't want to do that. What I normally do when I'm sharing and they say, look, I'd really like your contact information. I really, want you to sponsor me, stuff like that. Say, look, I usually go to a specific meeting and you can meet me there once you get out, and we'll talk about it, but we can't talk about it now. And, don't accept money or gifts or give money or gifts to any resident. That includes Oh, I did this wonderful piece of artwork for you. Um, Fine, you can give it to me when you get out. Don't give out your address or phone number. If you ask about it, you can say, look, I'm here for you. This isn't about me. Why is this? So I'll give you an example. A person I know gave out their phone number. This was in a different area to the jail. For the next 3 years, they got phone calls saying, hey, man, can you help me out here? I need some bail money. It turned out that somebody took their phone number and they wrote it in the bathroom, and it got all over the jail, and it stayed there as this is a person you might be able to hit up to for some bail money. How it got morphed to that, I don't know, but so we try not to give out that sort of address, but it's perfectly fine to set them up to say, look, come to this specific meeting when you get out, and I'll probably be there. You don't want to break a person's anonymity, of course. And while you need to talk a little bit about what happened, you don't want to emphasize your war story while sharing. No flashy jewelry, don't or cash. Don't use excessive profanity. I mean, you're going to drop an F-bomb once in a while to make a point, if that's your style, and that's okay. But if every third word's an F-bomb, it detracts from the message. Again, no favoritism, no messages in or out. There was a case of where somebody really wanted to have a message sent to somebody who who lived very near there, and when they said, and when they actually did that, they carried a message to somebody. They knocked on the door and said, you know, so and so says hi. It turned out that that so and so had raped the person, and they were continuing to mess with them. You know, you have to take some of this stuff not at face value. A point is a lot of inmates, particularly if you're in prison or in jail, especially if they're not, if they're still in process of being tried or sentenced, are going to want to talk about their guilt or innocence. Try not to buy into that. You don't ask them what type of crime they did or anything. That's the usual thing if you happen to be in jail, to find out what the person's like. But that's not what we do, because there's no recovery in that. A simple guideline in facilities is that men work with the men and women work with the women. Best we can. Once in a while, due to shortage of volunteers, we may have some temporary crossover, but we try not to do that. Literature, just to reiterate here, the meeting schedules need to be available. There's a recommended set of literature that the H&I subcommittee does by group conscience. It has the local helpline number on it. And all the facilities we go into, jails, treatment centers, they all want free literature from NA because they don't have to pay for it. Particularly treatment facilities, we want to provide those facilities with literature order forms and encourage the facility to go and buy its own NA literature. They have a much larger budget than we do. So you're going to get questions and answers. You want to leave a certain amount of time at the end of the meeting for questions and answers, you know, so they can discuss what was presented, what you talked about. But a couple of things to keep in mind is that don't let somebody take the meeting hostage. Get your questions from as many different people as possible, and do your best to minimize crosstalk simply by saying, look, we don't really crosstalk here. In these questions and answers, you're going to get asked about other programs and fellowships, religion, politics, even sports, rules, regulations, all sorts of issues that do not pertain to recovery from addiction in the NA fellowship. Don't get drawn into there. It's really easy to do, especially if you have a strong opinion. Remember, you are representing NA, and your job is to provide your experience, strength, and hope about your recovery and what NA has done for you. That's your focus. The H&I guidelines that our subcommittee has for panel members. So these requirements are set by each area. That's not the region. And these suggested guidelines have been verified by our area. And so this is our area's guidelines. If you want any change in this, you can come to the subcommittee and we can take a group conscience vote at the H&I subcommittee if we want to make an exception. So you need 6 months abstinence from all drugs. You have to be 6 months clean and working a program with a sponsor. You want to have a strong NA message of recovery from addiction, and you're willing to comply with all the H&I subcommittee and facility requirements. The H&I subcommittee requirements, of course, would have been outlined in this orientation. And you're able to carry the message in a responsible manner. That's the do's and don'ts. So details on the clean time guidelines is anybody can show up at the H&I subcommittee and learn, talk to, etc. I don't care if you're still using, you can still attend the subcommittee meetings. It's absolutely open. 4 to 6 months, observation only. You can attend a treatment center, H&I panel, but you're there speaking only. You're there listening only, not speaking. Now, the panel leader may make an exception. An example of an exception is, let's say you've got 4 or 5 months clean, but you had several years clean and relapsed, and now you're back doing, wanting to do H&I. The panel leader may make an exception, but it's an exception. At 6 months, you can be a full-fledged panel member. You've gone through all this orientation and so forth. A year for your panel leader, and of course, experience. For the jail or prison, you need a year plus clearance in the jail, which is, and requirements for the jail or prison varies with the facility. The prisons in New Mexico require 3 years off probation or parole and completion of the facility training and the clearance. And of course, we want to emphasize you don't ever have to have been in jail or prison to carry the message. I've been doing H&I for 32 years, and I never did prison time. And I never did any significant jail time either. How do you pick an H&I meeting that works for you? Well, you probably want to start with a treatment center since you don't have to go through all the clearance process. But you must have clearance to do an institution meeting. And just because you meet the criteria for clearance doesn't mean your clearance will be approved. They tend to vary, and we've had cases where, for example, the local jail, they said, no, we don't want this person, and they don't really even tell us why, although they seem to have all the criteria needed. And you want to check, of course, if you've got a conflict of interest. It may be prudent for you to go to a meeting where you don't have a conflict. Conflict of interest, obvious one would be working there. Usually you need to go to the H&I subcommittee meeting to be considered for an H&I panel member. Occasionally a little lax with that, but that's the recommended procedure. Orientation, that's the 4 to 6 month period. It is, that allows you to become familiar so you're not rushed into it. You know what you're committing to. So you spend a little bit of time, you talk to different people, and you see how a meeting goes. And then we want you to be really comfortable, know what you're getting into before you commit, because As opposed to many other service commitments, in this case, you are visible to the outside world. So we don't want you to commit to show up and then not show up. So you want to do a personal commitment check. Do you have the time? There's a certain amount of time involved. Even it's less time on Zoom because you don't have travel, but nonetheless, it's a time commitment. And you should talk to both your sponsor and your family about making that commitment. Don't volunteer if you're not sure you can fulfill. And if you happen to just be a speaker, then and you can't make it, give the coordinator at least 48 hours notice so they can fill that position if you could, please. Occasionally, some facility may want additional information. There's a newsletter that's written by addicts for addicts in institutions, and that's an interesting thing. Normally, this would have a small group discussion, but we're doing this a little bit differently, but I'm going to go through the discussion questions. So, what would you do if you're going into a treatment center, you're the panel leader, and you see a panel member that's asking an inappropriate question, such as, come over to my place when you get out. It may have a sexual connotation. It may have a work connotation. They're a plumber or something. It's still inappropriate, and a panel leader has to say, look, you can't do that. You can tell them to meet you at a meeting, but certainly not at their place, and certainly not as part of being an H&I panel member. That includes the discussion after the closing prayer, where they may talk to you in addition. What do you do if you're a panel leader and the treatment center wants to bar a specific individual from your panel? This has happened a few times. And they say, that person can't come in. Well, if you're the panel leader, you, first of all, have the person wait in the car or leave. But secondly, you also follow up with the treatment center. Well, okay, what happened? Did that person do something wrong? You want to find out if there was a misunderstanding. You want to find out what the issue is. You want to bring that to the H&I subcommittee for discussion to find out maybe there's a policy that needs to be changed. Some of this happened when things were cracking down more on sexual harassment, for example. But you want to find out what it is. And here's another thing: that can a person hold a position on staff at a treatment center and be on an H&I panel in the same treatment center? So I'll discuss this. If you're on staff and you're doing an H&I panel, you can get caught in a conflict of interest. I'll give you a specific example. You're in an H&I panel member and there's no other staff person there except you, and one of the clients gets up and says, I snuck out last night and I used, but I'm back and I'm really recommitted now. I see how it doesn't work. If you're representing an H&I panel, you're going to say, keep coming back. But if you're a staff at a treatment center, that's a violation of rules and the person has to be kicked out. You don't want to put yourself in that position. So do an H&I panel in a different treatment center. In the prison stuff, what do you do if an inmate hands you a note that reads, "Tell my mom I'm okay"? You have to hand it back. So I can't do that. On the other hand, if it says I'm being raped in my cell, I don't know what to do, you need to follow the reporting that you got when that particular facility did its sexual harassment training, and they'll tell you who to give it to. If for some reason you don't know or don't remember, you give it to, you go to the command central and talk to them. You do not talk to the person who escorts you. And if there's any follow-up questions, there's some contact information for you. And that concludes our training video.